Steel Magnolias turned beauty parlor gossip, blush and bashful wedding colors, and small-town rituals into one of cinema's most enduring portraits of Southern womanhood. Premiering in 1989, it followed a tight-knit circle of women who orbit Truvy's beauty spot in Natchitoches, Louisiana. Anchored by Julia Roberts Shelby, a young bride with type 1 diabetes determined to risk everything to become a mother, and Sally Fields Mullen, a devoted mom who knows that pregnancy could cost her daughter her life, but can't stop her from trying. Around them swirled a remarkable ensemble. Dolly Parton's warm-hearted salon owner Truvy, Shirley Mlan's gloriously prickly Weezer, Olympia Dukakis' sharp-tongued Clary, Daryl Hannah's shy newcomer Annel, and Dylan McDermott's steadfast Jackson. Together, they made audiences laugh at quick-fire one-liners, fall silent during hospital monitor beeps, and walk out of theaters calling their own mothers, sisters, and friends. Across a hit off-Broadway run and a film adaptation that became a national ugly cry event, Steel Magnolias embedded itself in pop culture as the story people quote at brunch and rewatch whenever they need a cathartic release. Yet behind the teasing in the beauty shop and the tears in the cemetery was a saga of raw grief, bruising on-set tensions, hard-won performances, and a real Louisiana town that never stopped living with the film's legacy. These are 15 shocking facts about Steel Magnolias. Stick around for number 15 to see how the real Shelby's mother used one heartbreaking scene to claim a moment of peace she never got in real life. Number 1. A brother turned his grief into a play in 10 days. Steel Magnolias began not as a Hollywood project, but as one man's attempt to keep his sister from disappearing into memory. In 1985, Susan Harling, only 33 years old, died from complications of type 1 diabetes. Just like Shelby in the film, she had been warned that pregnancy could be deadly. She chose to have a child anyway. In 1983, she gave birth to a son named Robert after her brother. 2 years later, she was gone. Robert Harling found himself haunted by a single fear that his nephew would grow up barely remembering his mother, or worse, would one day call someone else mama without ever really knowing who Susan had been. A friend suggested he write it all down. Harling tried a short story but quickly realized that Southern women, especially the kind who populate small-town beauty shops, do not fit easily into neat paragraphs. They interrupt, they overlap, they spar, and comfort in the same breath. They needed dialogue. So he locked himself away, and in what he later described as a 24/7 tsunami of Southernness, wrote the entire play in just 10 days. Not an outline, not a few scenes, the whole thing. What started as a desperate attempt to preserve his sister's spirit for her child became Steel Magnolias, first as a play that devastated off-Broadway audiences, and then as the framework for the 1989 film that would introduce Shelby and Mange to the world. Harling wrote it for one boy who had lost his mother. Audiences everywhere ended up seeing their own families in it. Number 2. The writer stepped into the story as Shelby's minister. When the play made its way to the screen, Robert Harling was already emotionally exhausted from turning his family's loss into a script. But director Herbert Ross saw another role for him. Ross asked Harling to appear in the movie as the minister, the man who stands at the center of both Shelby's wedding and Shelby's funeral. Harling wasn't a trained film actor, but he agreed. That decision placed him in the most symbolically charged position in the story. At the beginning of the film, it's Harling's minister who pronounces Shelby and Jackson husband and wife. By the end, the same minister presides over Shelby's funeral. For Harling, it meant bookending his sister's fictional married life, joy at one end, devastation at the other. By stepping into the pulpit on film, Harling made himself part of his sister's story one more time. Number 3. Bette Davis tried to cast the movie herself. Long before the film version reached theaters, Steel Magnolia was a stage hit, and one of its earliest powerhouse fans was old Hollywood royalty. Bette Davis saw the play in New York and immediately recognized a role she believed should be hers, Weezer, the irritable, sharp-edged neighbor whose bark hides a bruised heart. Davis did not wait for agents or formal offers. She picked up the phone, called Robert Harling directly, and invited him to tea. Harling thought it might be a prank. It wasn't. He walked into a New York hotel to find Bette Davis seated with a teacup, already talking as though the role were settled. Then she went even further. In that single conversation, Davis started casting the entire movie for him. Katharine Hepburn as Claire, Elizabeth Taylor as Truvy. An imagined ensemble of legends conjured like she was programming her own classic film channel. As their meeting ended, Davis delivered a parting line that felt half gracious, half warning. "You may give the role of Weezer to someone else, but you, and they will hear from Bette Davis." Producers ultimately decided she was too frail for the physical demands of the part. Davis died in 1989, the same year the film was released. The role of Weezer went to Shirley Mlan, whose performance is so fiercely unfiltered that you can almost sense the spirit of Davis's determination lingering around the edges. Number 4. Casting Shelby took a zigzagging path to Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts' Shelby feels inevitable now, a role that seems made for her particular blend of warmth and steel, but reaching that casting choice required an unexpected chain of near misses. Producers initially wanted Daryl Hannah in the lead. Hannah read the script, looked at the fragile young mother at its center, and asked for Enel instead, drawn more to the outsider's awkwardness than to Shelby's arc. With Hannah relocated to Enel, the search continued. Meg Ryan signed on to play Shelby only to depart when Harry Met Sally came along. Winona Ryder's name entered the conversation, but she was still only 16 or 17, far younger than the audience's likely image of a married young woman grappling with high-risk pregnancy. Laura Dern was also considered, but didn't secure the part. Finally, the casting director brought in Julia Roberts, then best known for Mystic Pizza and hardly a household name. She walked into the room and brought what one family member later described as the essence of the great Southern gal and changed the course of the film. Her Shelby would go on to earn an Oscar nomination. The role slipped past every more obvious option until it landed with the one actress who could carry both Shelby's joy and her fate. Number 5. Julia Roberts learned Shelby over backyard burgers. Once Roberts had the role, she didn't treat Shelby as an abstract character on a page. She went straight to the people who had lived the story. Before cameras rolled, Roberts spent time with Robert Harling's parents in their backyard. While Harling's father grilled hamburgers, they told Roberts about the daughter they had lost, the way she moved through a room, how she laughed, what she feared, and what she refused to give up. Harling later remembered the first time Roberts walked into their home. It wasn't that she physically resembled Susan. It was something less tangible. He said it felt as if somebody just turned the lights on in the room. Those conversations became the backbone of Roberts' performance. She built Shelby from stories, small details, and a brother's memories. By the time Roberts stepped onto set in Shelby's blush and bashful wedding dress, she was no longer playing a generic young woman in peril. She was honoring someone she had never met, but had come to know through shared meals, gentle stories, and the gravity of being trusted with a family's grief. Number 6. The director's grief turned filming into emotional boot camp. The tenderness on screen stands in sharp contrast to many stories from the set. At the center of that tension was director Herbert Ross. Cast members described him as awful, particularly in his treatment of Julia Roberts, who was the youngest in the ensemble. He criticized her frequently, questioned her choices, and reportedly reduced her to tears more than once. Even Dolly Parton was not spared. Ross asked her if she could even act, prompting her to deliver a line that has since become famous. "No," she said, but it was his job to make it look like she could. Context deep in the picture. Ross was grieving his own devastating loss. His wife, ballerina Nora Kay, had died about a year and a half before production after nearly 3 decades of marriage. That unresolved grief seemed to bleed into his work, hardening his manner on set. Eventually, the actresses pushed back. Shirley Mlan confronted Ross directly, telling him he had been behaving badly since Nora's death and making it clear that his treatment of Roberts and others was no longer acceptable. The veteran cast closed ranks around their youngest member. The result was complicated, a film that beautifully portrays female friendship and solidarity, partly because that same solidarity had to be summoned off camera to withstand a difficult leader lost in his own mourning. Number 7. Sally Field's cemetery breakdown was one shattering take. If there's a single moment most viewers remember from Steel Magnolias, Its mains break down at the cemetery, a cascade of rage, disbelief, and unspeakable sorrow that still feels almost too intimate to watch. The heart of it, the raw explosion of grief from Sally Field, was captured in a single take. To prepare, Field spent hours screaming into a pillow, deliberately wrecking her voice. She wanted it hoarse, frayed, and far beyond the polished sound of conventional screen emotion. When cameras rolled on her key monologue at the grave, Herbert Ross did something he had not always managed elsewhere on set. He let go. No interruptions, no immediate redirects, just Field moving through every stage of grief, from bitter humor to fury to utter collapse in one continuous performance. When she finished, the crew stood still. No one moved to reset. No one wanted to ask her back to that place a second time. Maine's pain is fictional. The feeling behind it, shaped by Field, by Harling's writing, and by the story's roots in real loss, is anything but. Number 8. Dolly Parton and Daryl Hannah trained like real stylists. The beauty parlor setting in Steel Magnolia is more than a backdrop. It's the story's central gathering place, where confessions are made and loyalties tested. Herbert Ross wanted those scenes to look and feel authentic, right down to the way hair was cut and styled. To solve it, the production brought in real hairstylists and put Dolly Parton and Daryl Hannah through intensive hands-on training, the kind of detailed instruction someone might get preparing for cosmetology boards. For Parton, this meant mastering techniques for other people's hair in a professional setting, spending weeks learning skills she would never need again once cameras stopped rolling. Hannah faced particular pressure in the opening wedding sequence, where one misstep with scissors could have turned a crucial scene into a continuity disaster. Ross refused to rely on camera angles or clever editing to hide inexperience. By the time filming started, both actresses had practiced enough that their on-screen work looked completely second nature. Number 9. Offset bonding sparked Robert Harling's next screen story. Shooting in a small Louisiana town left the cast with limited distractions once the workday ended. With no big city nightlife to scatter to, the actresses spent their evenings together playing games, sharing long conversations, and commiserating about the emotional demands of the shoot. Those nights became real friendships that lasted long after production ended. One evening, Robert Harling used the informal setting to ask a seemingly straightforward question. What kinds of roles did each of them want to play next? Sally Field's answer stood out. After years of portraying earnest, morally grounded women in unglamorous surroundings, she said she wanted to play a woman who gets to wear nice clothes, a complicated, difficult woman whose power wasn't softened by plain wardrobes or heavy burdens. Harling took the comment seriously. 2 years later, he wrote Soap Dish, a film centered on a glamorous, volatile soap opera star, a role that gave Field exactly the combination she had described. Those evenings in Louisiana did more than knit together the ensemble. They seeded a new story born from an actress's candid wish to step outside the box she'd been placed in. Number 10. A screen marriage turned into a short-lived engagement. On camera, Shelby and Jackson are newlyweds navigating the joys and strains of married life. Off camera, their actors, Julia Roberts and Dylan McDermott, found themselves drawn together in ways that blurred the line between performance and reality. When filming began, Roberts had recently ended a relationship with Liam Neeson. The conditions were almost tailor-made for intense connections, months spent together in a small town sharing emotional scenes in a story built around family and loss. During the 1989 production, Roberts and McDermott began a relationship that quickly became serious, and by the time Steel Magnolia was finished, they were engaged. Unfortunately, the spell did not last. The film opened in November 1989, and by 1990, the engagement had ended. Their story became one more reminder of how intense insular filming environments can blur feelings, especially when the story itself revolves around love under pressure. Number 11. Natchitoches became a living memorial to Steel Magnolia. Robert Harling was adamant that if Steel Magnolia was going to be filmed, it had to be filmed in Natchitoches, Louisiana, the soil his family's story had grown from. That insistence permanently altered the town's place in popular culture. Decades after the cameras left, fans still travel from around the world to walk the film's real-life paths, visiting the cemetery, the Lemmy House, and St. Augustine Catholic Church, where Shelby's wedding unfolded. For the film's 30th anniversary in 2019, Natchitoches embraced its legacy with a blush and bashful weekend featuring look-alike contests, Easter egg hunts, and a reception with a bleeding armadillo cake. The most significant tribute stands in the Susan Harling Robinson Memorial Park, which includes a fountain, benches, and a plaque with her photograph and a biography written by her brother, transforming a private loss into a public space of reflection. Number 12. Fans can sleep in Shelby's blush and bashful house. The house at 320 Jefferson Street in Natchitoches, a Greek Revival residence built around 1841, served as the Eaton family home during filming. After the film became a phenomenon, it was transformed into a bed and breakfast, known as the Steel Magnolia House. The home offers 6 suites, each named after a character from the film. The Shelby Room, decorated in shades of pink, includes one particularly striking artifact, the original clawfoot bathtub Julia Roberts used in the opening scene. Guests can eat breakfast in the dining room where family meals were shot and watch the film surrounded by the very walls they see on screen. Number 13. Lifetime reimagined the story with an all-black cast. In 2012, Lifetime produced a remake featuring Queen Latifah as Mine, Jill Scott as Truvy, Alfre Woodard as Weezer, Felicia Rashad as Clary, and Condola Rashad as Shelby. Producers were intentional about the choice, wanting to give prominent black actresses the kind of complex central roles still rare in Hollywood. The remake updated the setting to contemporary times while keeping much of the original dialogue and structure intact. When it premiered on October 7, 2012, the film drew 6.5 million viewers, making it Lifetime's third most-watched original movie ever. Many critics praised the performances, particularly from Alfre Woodard and Felicia Rashad, and acknowledged that the central story translated powerfully across cultural contexts. Number 14. They brought back the Real nurse who turned off life support. Director Herbert Ross was determined that the medical sequences feel authentic. He sought out members of the real medical team who had cared for Susan Harling Robinson during her final days and cast them to recreate their roles on camera. Among them was the nurse who had turned off Susan's life support in real life. In the movie, she moves through the motions of shutting down the machines again, this time on Shelby, repeating for the cameras what she had once done in a hospital room under far different circumstances. Robert Harling later said that choice brought a heavy sense of gravity and reality to the scenes, blurring the line between reenactment and memory in a way that explains why those moments feel so painfully real. Number 15. The real Shelby's mother needed to see her get up and walk away. If one story captures the emotional core of Steel Magnolias, it belongs to Margaret Harling, the real-life mother behind Mained. When the time came to film the scene in which Shelby's life support is disconnected, Robert Harling begged his mother not to come to set. He knew what it would entail. Julia Roberts made up to resemble Susan in her final days, lying motionless as monitors recorded her fading life, surrounded by some of the very people who had been in the room when Susan died. He feared it would be too much for Margaret to bear. She arrived anyway and stood behind the monitors watching the whole thing. Afterward, Robert asked why she had put herself through it. Her answer was simple and devastating. I wanted to see Julia get up and walk away. That was the one mercy reality had denied her. In life, when the machines stopped, Susan did not rise. But on set in Louisiana, Margaret could watch an actress portray her daughter's death and then see her stand alive the instant someone called cut. For a few seconds, art gave her what real life never had, the sight of her child leaving the hospital room under her own power. It did not change the past. It did not erase the loss. But it offered a moment of imagined closure framed by cables and camera tracks. Steel Magnolia is often remembered for its quotable lines and its blend of humor and heartbreak. At its deepest level, though, it's about exactly this, finding some way, however imperfect, to live with grief that never fully goes away. Thanks for watching these 15 shocking and often deeply moving truths behind Steel Magnolia. Which fact stayed with you the most? If revisiting this story brought back memories of the first time you cried through Maine's speech or Shelby's final scenes, hit like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who still quotes this movie whenever they need a good cathartic cry. And until next time, keep watching Vintage Diaries.